Hey everyone there in internet land, welcome back to Doodling with Purpose, the internet's only week-by-week lesson in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. And did I mention free? Yeah, there's no charge for this. The only thing I ask is that you sit back, relax, and enjoy yourself and do some learning. Hey, if you want, you could share it with some friends, but otherwise, no charge. Let's jump in. So, last week I gave you this cartouche. Cartouche being the circle around a name. Comes from the French cartridge. It's because what the French thought these looked like when they found ancient Egyptian in the late 1700s. So transliterated, this would be Raburbut, which is definitely not my wife Barbara's name. And the challenge that I gave everyone was, well, how does this cartouche say Barbara? Because it clearly cannot be read straight from left to right. And we know it's left to right because we're reading into the boot, because the boot's facing to the left. All right, so the first thing we do is we notice that the first glyph is Ra, the sun, R-A, the little 3 mark being the pronunciation mark, which we talked about. So this is honorific transposition. So we're going to move this to the end, even though it appears first, to honor Ra. And if we move this to the end, and then we notice that the last letter, the T, is just the feminine. All female names end in T, so we don't need to read that. So therefore, now we can see how this could be Barbara, with the Ra pronounced at the end because of honorific transposition. All right. Now we're going back to the 4 H's, and I'm not talking about shaving sheep and getting goats to lay eggs. I'm talking about the 4 different ways H's can be pronounced. So this is universal for all languages, but in ancient Egyptian, the 4 we're going to deal with are the H, like hello. Then an H with a dot under it is a hiss, like a snake. And then with the little frowny face is a bak, the K, like bak or night lick, my last name. And then the H with the dash is hue, in the back of the throat. All right, so our next glyph is a plant. Actually, it's a plant rush, meaning not like that kind of rush, meaning like the plants that pop up first under the soil. They're called rushes. This is a Egyptian plant. This is a rush poking up to the Nile, and this is what you're drawing here. See how everything is about being in Egypt? Pretty easy to draw. We're going to have a little squiggly line up, and then our 2 shoots to the right with a little squiggle to them. You can see more in detail in the first part of the class. And then, of course, the top is a standard triangle, which you can do detail inside, which consists of doing a little, the Bart Simpson up and down, that's the watermark, and then lines out of it. So here I have it here. You can just run that across the bottom, and then bring up some vertical lines with a slight curve to them from the middle, the left, and the right. And that is how you do the details inside of all of the rush flowers. And this works for several different glyphs that all have the same type of plant. All right, so this is hin, like a hissing and an N, hin. And it can, interesting glyph because it can actually, well, like a lot of glyphs, mean what it is. Let's look at this one. So here's a word where we see this glyph twice. Anytime you see a glyph twice like this, if it repeats at the end, the last one is the determinative. Another good hint for you. So here we have he, hin, yi. And you notice that we have some repeat sounds here. And the repeat sounds are kind of actually boxed in. So we have an H with the dot under it, followed by H dot N, followed by N. So that means that middle sign can actually be removed. Why is it even there? Well, again, we've talked about how Egyptian is an elastic language. They need to shrink or be able to write smaller or bigger, depending on how much space they had, because they were writing on walls. So they might need to extend a word or shrink a word. It's why hieroglyphics are so elastic. So in this case, you've got an extra HN in the middle, but it's still pronounced hni, which means rush or plant rush. Similar to how you can use the ideogram hieroglyph for a house plan or a heart, per and ib, to mean what they are. So same thing, you can actually have just the rush glyph, and it will, instead of, because the word for rush is the same as the pronunciation. So you're actually saying the word, more or less. I know, it's a little hard to wrap your head around. The way you know it's an ideogram is more or less, well, you've added to it a stroke line. So these stroke lines circled in red here, under it indicate that we're looking at this for a literal meaning, not just the sound it makes. It would be like having, an apple have the sound apple, or it could mean the fruit. All right, let's move on to our next pronunciation for our bilateral H's, and that's here, here. H, again, that hissing H in the back of the throat. So this is a face. It looks more complicated to draw than it really is. You actually just start with an oval and then give a little squiggly line for the hair. Then you do the ear detail, which is basically just kind of two candy cane loops down, making sure the ears are a little elongated. They're sort of, not like a Vulcan, but they are pointed up a little bit. Then we do the face detail, circles for the eyes. Don't forget the eyebrows, very important. The nose is two lines, and then the mouth is sort of two ovals. So this is here. And again, it can also be an ideogram, so it can mean the word face, because here is the Egyptian word for face. It can either be pronounced like part of a word, like face off, or if you have an ideogram, you would have a dash. So it's how the word, that's a perfect example, how the word face could be used for the word face off, or FaceTime. It could be a face and a clock, right? All right, ideograms, they're fun. So here we have a word using HR not as an ideogram, but actually as the sound HR. So we have her, followed by the chick, which is W, and then hopefully you recognize at the end here, this is the trilateral sound, renip. With a T, it turns it into the word year, or regional year. We covered this a while back when we were doing dates and numbers. So this makes it the word heru renip. So put together, again, we have the R that's sandwiched, or not, well, not as much sandwich, but is a repeat sound. Again, just make sure it looks nice written on the wall. So we might add extra letters if we need to stretch it out. So this is the paginomial days, which are the days at the end of the year that are added to ensure that all the calendar dates fall at the right time. So what is an pagomeal? It's basically like the ancient Egyptian version of leap year, more or less. So it's making sure it's restructuring the calendar. It's making sure the calendar is correct, and it's days of games and praises to the gods, and that's special time at the end of the year to make sure the calendar is correct. All right, our last hiss, the hissing sound is the HS sound. This is a water jug. One of my favorites to draw. It was actually one of the very first glyphs I ever learned. I'm not sure why I went out of order originally, but yeah, I just picked this one up. It's like one of my first three. So starting with that straight line, and then those neat little curves up to the top, and then you make a little T to indicate the plug or the top of the jar. And you'll see this glyph show up a lot, even as repeat, like 3 jars in a row. So here's a word that uses it, and again, we've got the same stretching out of the words and an interesting determinative at the end. You'll notice it's a sitting man, but there's 2 basic types of sitting man. The sitting man that's touching his mouth or pointing to his mouth, and the one that's, basically doing anything else, shrugging, pointing, throwing. Anytime you use the one pointing to his mouth, this means it's a determinative for a concept that can be spoken but can't physically be, something like love or happiness. So in this case, he's pointing to his mouth, and the word chasti, which again we've got the double H there added in order to elongate the word. It could be written with or without that. And because the determinative, we notice, is not just a sitting man, but a sitting man pointing to his mouth, we know that this is a word for something that comes out of the mouth. And in this case, it's favor or to favor, like to favor a king, to favor a god. If the man was not pointing to his mouth, then we would know this was an occupation or something a man did. So here we have just the water jug with the stroke line and then a T added because it's a feminine word. So this can just mean water jug, much like we talked about face and heart and house. All of these can work, the words for the object can either be worked into the word, like if the word belief was written with a B and a leaf, like the B part of believe. All right, so now you can also stretch it out. We can add in another S sound here if we have extra room in our rock surface. So again, just another example of how the spelling is not important. It's the meaning, and it's the determinatives, because you could add extra letters. And we threw some of those in here. So here's your homework. It's actually a sentence we've had before way back when, but it's a good time to bring it back since we're dealing with some of this vocabulary and structurally how this elastic nature works, shall we say. So dive in, pause it, and we'll come back next week and decode it. Don't forget to transliterate and translate it. And again, thank you for being part of this class. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below and I will get to them ASAP. And thank you for joining this week. I'll see you guys next week for more doodling with purpose.